We have a wide range of needs within Delaware County that I think sometimes are not seen in the same way that things have been seen before. Of course, we are a very affluent county, but there are still needs. We have students who have full rides to, over the course of the last 5 years, Ohio Wesleyan, USC. And when they turn 18, they are being asked to leave the home that they've been in throughout their school career. These are students who are excellent students. Along those same lines, without them finishing high school and having a stable home environment, they're not going to be afforded that opportunity to continue on to that next level of education. We also have students who are working full time to support themselves while living in their home, but that home is unstable. They may be able to stay there one night, but then the family is saying, you're not able to come back. And so then they are couch surfing or staying with someone else. And again, fully working 40 hours a week while going to school and have a plan, but have nowhere stable to stay.
Sure. We've had a couple instances there. We don't have many because like you mentioned, we are an affluent county, but some of the struggles we have is the two working parents. And we've had a case where one parent was incarcerated and forced the other parent to lose her home, and our students were living out of a hotel. We had another instance off the top of my head where parents were divorced, and that loss of income from that side forced the mother to lose their home and had no place to stay. So despite being quite affluent in our area, we do run into it as well. Okay.
I would note two categories of cases. One is our abuse neglect dependency docket, the children's services docket, a large category of which are folks who have significant issues relating to poverty and housing insecurity, whether it's the inability to keep food on the table or utilities on, or just to pay the rent. And those cases are scattered throughout the county, in Lewis Center, in Delaware, in Ashley, in Sunbury, in Galena, in unincorporated parts of the county. And then aside from issues of affluence or household income, we see all the juvenile cases. And those juveniles may come from very well-off homes, but the juveniles need to leave for their own safety, or a parent has a drug issue, or a parent becomes incarcerated, or the child is kicked out of the home by the parents, whatever it may be, as Superintendent Kegley was suggesting earlier with some of those kids, and they simply have nowhere to go. There is no place for them, and they're couch surfing, as she suggested, going from friend to friend for a few days at a time, or as long as a parent of the friend may allow them to be there.
So in Olentangy, I would say that we're seeing similar things to what the other districts have brought up. An example that I didn't hear yet that we have worked with students on is students that age out of the foster care system as well, where they might still be attending high school, but now we have to work with them on finding a different housing situation because they're no longer able to stay in the foster home that they were in before.
Pretty much Heidi and Judge Hebanowski hit a lot of what I was going to say, but I will say that we have seen quite a number this year. We've worked with about 8 students so far in trying to find some stable housing for them once they turn 18 and are asked to leave the home. The majority is probably friends coming forward that are concerned about one of their friends. And we also get a fair number of referrals through English papers, because the students will process through what they're going through in their English papers, and their English teacher will then forward that on to us.
Sure. Court actionary, that is, the cases come to us because they're filed by somebody. So we often see it because Children's Services has become involved, or because a student who is homeless or who is has nowhere to go is found on the streets by the police department or something of that nature. We've tried to be less reactionary. So we've got our assessment center that the United Way and the city schools house over at the Willis building. And occasionally we'll get referrals there, or we'll otherwise see cases through other filings that come to the court. But for us, it's often Children's Services, law enforcement, and the school districts who bring those matters to our attention.
Typically for me, I am getting feedback from a trusted adult in the school district for that student, which is oftentimes either a teacher or a coach. whether a student says something directly or if that teacher or that coach notices a change in that student's behavior, that will typically clue them in that there's something that we need to process some more and find out more information about. If that student's able to open up and share that information with that adult and then bring it to me, we'll go from there, or they might ask me to talk with that student and we'll determine what the extent of the student's concerns as far as housing and stability are. But really it's those trusted adults that we really rely on to help notice that behavior and information.
Well, the trusted adult is a big thing, but in my position previous as a building administrator, a lot of times it was through the attendance rate. So if we see a change in their attendance, that will prompt us to reach out to the parents and families, and then we typically get a lot of good information there, or find out a situation we weren't made aware of prior to that. But attendance rate is a big thing for us. The pattern for us has been, if the attendance is poor, there typically isn't affordable housing in Delaware County. So we find that our students may be in Marion trying to get down, and we have parents trying to get their kids here, or they're in with a grandparent who isn't ready to get that student to school. So we end up finding that there are some other cases that keep that student from being able to easily get to school.
So previously I was the principal at Willis for 15 years, and 5 years ago is when I first started noticing this concern and shared it with the United Way staff. And I think part of that speaks to what Samantha and Jeremy said, and CJ, is those trusted relationships, that awareness of knowing who to go to. When United Way approached us and wanted to come here to Willis, it was so we could be a one-stop, without judgment, place for people to come and get the help that they need. For me, I think it's because the students knew Willis was a safe place that they started sharing when they were having housing issues, because their biggest fear was having to leave the school and the community that they know. And these are students who want to be at school. They come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, all different family dynamics, but they want to be in school. And their biggest fear is not being able to continue attending school where they live. So for me, the concern now is ensuring that that trust is being built district-wide, so students have someone that they know they can go to and know that we're going to try to find solutions. The unfortunate part right now in Delaware County is there is no youth transitional housing for any of our school districts. We experienced just recently, last year, a girl who was kicked out of her home from Big Walnut, but was part of the Career Center program at the equine program housed at the Delaware County Fairgrounds. She was able to have a room with another family at Family Promise that she did not know, but it was a grandma and young children, and they were able to work through that due to the COVID situation. But she so wanted to finish that program. She called my desk phone directly because her boyfriend was a Delaware City school student who said, Willis can help you. And that's what we want for United Way and strengthening families and all of our school communities. So that is a situation where that wasn't one of our students, but she desperately wanted to finish her program and graduate. And she was able to do so.
I just wanted to add on to what Superintendents Froelich and Kegley said. Around here, we often refer to truancy as the canary in the coal mine, in that it is typically the first change in behavior, or first sign that there is a larger problem. Our mediators here at the court do school truancy mediations for all 5 school districts in the county. And truancy will often be the first thing that we see that triggers a conversation about a drug and alcohol issue, a mental health issue, a parenting issue, a home safety issue, or in this case, very often a housing issue, and the fact that housing and transportation have become a major problem and the student simply isn't able to get to school. Earlier, kids aging out of foster care, which is a major source of these youth housing issues that we have. Even in that area where we have the largest, frankly, source of potential funding and support of any of the categories of kids that we're talking about, those issues are insufficient. In Ohio, we have now what's called the Bridges program. So kids who are in foster care when they turn 18 have the ability to have additional housing for education, additional funding for education or housing from 18 to age 21, so long as they are either a full-time student or working full-time or some combination of the two. But here in Delaware County, the problem we run into is whether it's a student who's aging out of foster care who has that potential funding to pay rent, or whether it's a student who has become homeless because they've been kicked out of their home, or they've left home at age 18, even if they have available funding to pay for rent or even to pay for transportation, there's no place for them to go. There are very few places that they can afford with the funding that's available, and there are very few places that will take them because they have no credit history and they have no rental history. And so even where we have resources in some of those cases, it's almost impossible to find housing. And then if we do find housing, it's almost impossible to find housing in a circumstance in which those kids can get to work or to school or to continuing education if they're going to Columbus State or something of that nature to continue their education. So yes, there are some resources out there to provide for rent or for other housing options, but even where those resources exist, we can't get all the way through the process to find appropriate and reliable transitional housing for kids. And I would note, I don't think we're talking about massive numbers of people. I don't think we're talking about hundreds of kids at a time. If we had a facility that could house 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, others can disagree with me and say the number should be a little higher than that. But if we had a transitional housing facility that could give us an option so that kids can establish a housing history, establish a rental history, and have some time to look for other options, that would go a long way towards solving the problem that we have currently.
Salvation Army has an incredible youth counts program set up to build capacity for students to learn budgeting, to pay for everything as they're learning to get themselves on their feet. But as Judge said, there are very few places where you are able to rent, even when they have guaranteed that that rent is going to be paid through the Salvation Army, that landlords are willing to rent without a year of rental history. An 18-year-old is incapable of having a year of rental history and quite frankly should not have to. Our students are still students in school trying to get their education, and then they are facing yet another obstacle to try to attend school each day.
I don't know if I'm adding much to it, but I know that a lot of times their students that are in these situations don't have someone that can help them fill out the necessary paperwork or forms or get them through the process to do that. So I'd say that is a huge gap that these particular children have. So if there are resources out there, a roadblock for them to get to it is that it's cumbersome and may take someone to navigate that process for them, which they may not have access to.
There are similar programs, or there are models of these kinds of programs around the country. There are a few even in Ohio. There are in Columbus and Toledo and Cleveland and others. For me anyway, coming from the kids who I see on our caseload here at the court, I would love to have something that's dedicated as youth transitional housing, that's set up specifically for that purpose, so that there are other persons in similar circumstances of similar ages in the same facility, apartment building, large home that's broken into apartments, whatever the building ended up being, and that potentially had I've used this word in our discussions on the housing committee, dorm style, if not dorm style living, that is if everybody had their own kitchenette and what else in their room, at least a resident advisor kind of person, an adult, a responsible adult in that facility. I'm glad I see heads nodding. I'm not totally off base, who could provide additional support to these kids. Superintendent Kegley mentioned a moment ago that the excellent program that the Salvation Army runs. These kids are just learning how to maintain a household, how to pay bills, how to manage getting to work on time, and all of those things. Having an adult presence may be key to making sure that they stay on task and stay focused and are successful as they transition into adulthood.
Prior to my role at Olentangy, I worked at Faith Mission as a case manager, which is a homeless shelter in Franklin County. And one of the things that we started to build there that I think is really important when we talk about this is continuity of care and being able to support students as they continue. So adding on to what the judge said with building in that type of advisor or case management type of person who then could also follow that student as they're in that transitional program. And then even as they are on their own, to be able to continue to be a resource and continue to be able to support those students, because we know that roadblocks will come up or something challenging will come up, and building a resource that's going to continue to be available to students even when they are successfully in housing or even as they are making steps. Being able to continue to help them as they go, because they might not have as much of that adult support that some of our students who are in traditional housing situations might have.
It's not as grand as their ideas, but it's as simple as transportation. One of the things we find for our kids is transportation. I know you guys have alluded to it already, but we have a 205 plus square mile district, and it is difficult for our kids to, especially some of our struggling kids to get to where they need, because they don't have reliable access to transportation, a cheap transportation. So that'd be huge for our district anyways.
We've also discussed with several on this call the addition of building in CCMEP with the housing, so the Comprehensive Case Management Employment Program through JFS, and that job stability while earning while they learn. And that's the same piece that we would like, in my magic wand version, would like to have with the youth transitional housing, because it's all encompassing. It's setting up for success long-term. And quite honestly, my phrase that I use all the time is, why do our children have to fail before they're given hope? Hope is something that they should be given without question. And that is what the struggle is when they are not able to have a safe place to sleep in order to do what they need to do as a student.
Just wanted to add that, 18 is not this magic number. And like everyone has said, they don't have the experience to do things that we kind of take for granted, like make doctor's appointments. They don't know how to do that, how to get their past records, and just the things that they need to be able to take care of themselves. So that one-stop wraparound care, I feel, is so important. And also the career readiness part, to give them the tools they need to be able to do this on their own.
I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be on the panel. Our youth are something I am passionate about. Their success is something they deserve and want, and anyone can call me at any time. I have lots of other stories to share, and I'm happy to share also the success stories, but we need a long-term solution, and that's what I'm hoping for.
I'm passionate about kids. I think everybody should have an opportunity to succeed despite the circumstances that they might not have had any doings. So I just want to see all kids be able to succeed.
I work directly with our students who are identified as displaced or homeless, and I would love to be able to add more resources to what I have right now to be able to continue to support those students.
As I indicated earlier, a lot of the kids who we come into contact with here at the court are already referred to us because of a children's services involvement or law enforcement involvement. CJ correctly said earlier, there's nothing magic happens when these kids turn 18. And the only magic line we have is a jurisdictional one, what happens when they turn 18. And the problem is, if they cross that jurisdictional line at 18 and we just cast them out into the world without the appropriate support, then they become involved across the alley in the adult court. And we definitely don't want that because that leads to a long-term pattern of all sorts of problems societally as well as with them individually.
I guess for me, I really would like to see, I think it's important that they have their voices heard, that, they each have their own story and the depth of their feelings that they don't have words for, to be able to, get that out there and let them be heard and have their needs be met.
I think what's really exciting about this is we get to create it. So, you know, what kind of funding do we want? Do we want to accept HUD funding and accept their parameters? We don't have to do that. We can raise, I know this community, we can raise the amount, you know, where do we want it to be? What kind of a billing do we want it to be? Do we need to build it? Do we need to partner with, I mean, it's just, we can create this from infancy. And I think that's why that's very exciting for us. And hey, we saw this need, and all of a sudden, Gina and United Way, oh, we have a new Delaware County Housing Alliance. Dina, do you want to be on the board and kind of help spearhead this? So that's kind of where I'm coming from also, again, as the WLN liaison, but just very excited. Again, it's a passion project for us. It's kind of the next big one. So we always are trying to get, you know, what's next? How can we next help improve our youth in Delaware County? And this is an amazing one that obviously needs addressed.
All right, so we actually have a lot of involvement in the Housing Alliance. We have quarterly large group meetings. So also if anyone on the call is interested in getting involved and learning more, just send an email and we'll get you signed up. So we have representation from some local governments. We have zoning authorities, we have some housing developers, we have, as everyone on this call here, we have school districts, we have the juvenile courts, Delaware Job and Family Services, the mental health board, some local businesses. I know I am missing. We have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of our partners within the housing continuum in our county. So all of those that are providing housing assistance, crisis housing, they're all involved as well. And when I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but it's a large group of community stakeholders. And then on our board, we actually have representation from, we have the County Economic Development Department. We have several just business community leaders. Again, we have, the Sheriff's Office, the reentry coordinator. We have United Way on our board. We have somebody from our Family Resource Center on the board. So again, we've tried to bring in people from different segments of the community, nonprofit, for-profit, and partner agencies that we work with. So we're getting a host of different viewpoints and kind of trying to address all the different housing issues for everywhere from crisis all the way through to permanent housing, permanent affordable housing. There is a lot of money out there that it is labeled for youth. However, it's not exactly, we don't have the ability to address and serve the population that we need to when we need to. So though there are dollars out there, there are definitions of when our youth need the help. So typically it's months down the road. And as we said, it's that one night you're trying to figure out where you're going to lay your head down to rest at night. You're not thinking about the future. And so every day that passes is crucial and critical. And unfortunately, a lot of the funding sources out there right now, we have to wait a certain length of time before we identify that this person really does need our help. So this is why we're going to more private funding sources, at least for this capital piece. And for operations, there may be some other funding out there, but that's what we found, at least on this team going down the road. But I would love to have some of the other panelists chime in.
There are a lot of resources out there for juveniles in these circumstances. If a 15-year-old is kicked out of their home by a parent, the Department of Job and Family Services is going to get involved. But if an 18-year-old, my daughter's going to be 18 next month, and she's still got 5 months of high school left, 6 months of high school left, I can count. Superintendent Keckley will correct me if I get that wrong, because she's a Delaware City school student. But if she turned 18 and I said, all right, you're out of here, she's not dependent anymore because she's now an adult, but she's still going to have to find some place to live. And she'd still have to figure out how to continue to get to school and how to transition into adulthood, which is why we're talking about this youth transitional housing, that 18 to 21 age period. And not that some younger kids won't still have some issues, but in particular, that 18 to 21 age group where kids begin to try and establish themselves. And in that area, while there is some funding, some kinds of things that we talked about earlier, to provide for perhaps that monthly rental payment or to provide for food or to provide for other things, there isn't the large dollar capital funding available out there to get the facility established, to get it up and running, and to get a simple place for us to turn to when those kids need housing in these circumstances. And Dan, as you said a moment ago, you talked about the Alliance's work on human trafficking earlier, and how early you were in intervening in that problem. You know, for years, early on in discussions about human trafficking, we talked about the sort of classic issues, but we didn't always talk about the kids who were essentially going out to try and find housing or to find food or to find drugs or to find whatever it might be, and were being trafficked in that way. And the payoff to them for whatever it is that they were doing was that, okay, I'll provide you a place to stay, or I'll provide you food. And you talked about them finding other resources. We find kids turning to human trafficking behaviors if they can't find other alternatives. And it's not just young women who do that, it's young women and young men who we see those circumstances with. So yes, there are some resources out there, but they are not the resources that we need to get this project off the ground and established.